They say time heals all wounds, but I don't think they ever met a man like Gerald. Even after 30 years, I still can't hear the slam of a car door without flinching. I still sleep with the hallway light on. And I still check the front lock 3 times before bed, even though this house is tucked in a quiet neighborhood and I've lived alone for nearly 2 decades. I built this peace with blood, sweat, and more tears than anyone will ever know. After I left Gerald, I swore one thing: I'd never let a man like that back into my life. I didn't expect the betrayal to come from my own daughter. Her name is Jasmine. She's 32 now, headstrong, beautiful, and successful in all the ways I prayed she'd be. I raised her by myself. I worked doubles, missed meals, and swallowed pride until my stomach bled so she could grow up far from the chaos I had escaped. I thought I had given her safety, strength, and sense. But 2 weeks ago, she showed up on my front porch with him, the man who used to break me with words and bruises, and said, "Mom, be polite. Gerald's staying with us for a while." I remember freezing, not like a dramatic pause, but like my body actually forgot how to move. Gerald stood behind her like a shadow. Same slick hair, same forced smile, like time hadn't touched his cruelty. He had aged Shura-gray at the temples, deeper lines across his face, but that same cold glint in his eye was still there. It crawled up my spine like it used to when I heard his keys in the door. I looked at Jasmine, hoping this was some sick misunderstanding. "Why is he here?" I asked, quiet but sharp. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "He needed help. He's homeless, and he's trying to get his life back together. You always told me to give people second chances." I didn't even know where to begin. Gerald didn't deserve a second chance at air, let alone my living room. I looked at her like she was someone I'd never met. "You brought him here?" I whispered. "You brought him into my house?" She huffed. "Mom, can you not make a scene? Just try to be civil." Civil? After what that man put me through? After the broken ribs, the silent sobbing in the bathtub, the years of therapy it took just to function? I was 26 when I married him. Young, eager, and in love with the idea of not being alone. He started with charm flowers, promises, and a voice that wrapped around you like velvet. But it didn't take long for the mask to slip. First it was jealousy, then yelling, then silence, that lasted for days. I remember the first time he hit me. It wasn't dramatic. It was a backhand across the cheek because I forgot to defrost chicken. I said nothing. I told no one. The shame lived in my skin. By the time Jasmine was born, I had started hiding bruises under makeup and long sleeves. I left when she was 4, after he threw a lamp that barely missed her head. I grabbed a duffel bag, picked her up from daycare, and never looked back. We slept in a shelter that first night, ate crackers for dinner, and I told her it was an adventure. I never let her see me cry. I swore I'd never let her near him again. I spent the next 3 decades protecting her from that part of my life. I should have told her the whole truth. Maybe then she wouldn't have brought the devil through my door with a suitcase and a fake apology. I didn't say a word as they stepped inside. Gerald looked around like he owned the place. Jasmine went to the guest room like it was normal. I went into the kitchen, leaned against the counter, and tried to breathe. My heart was thudding in my ears. I was 65 now. I had worked hard for my quiet mornings, my garden, my herbal tea routine. I didn't deserve this. But more than anything, I was hurt. Not by Gerald, that pain was old. Familiar, it was Jasmine. My Jasmine. How could she stand next to that man and ask me to be civil? How could she erase everything I went through, everything she survived through me, just to play savior? That night, I sat in bed awake while he snored in the guest room down the hall. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just made a decision. I wasn't that broken young woman anymore. This was my house, my life. And Jasmine might have invited him in, but I was the one who would show him the way back out. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Old habits never die, especially when you've spent half your life on edge. I made my tea and sat by the window in silence, hoping the peace I had built still lived somewhere inside this house. It didn't feel like mine anymore, not with his coat draped over my dining chair and his deep, rumbling laugh echoing through my hallway the night before. I hadn't slept. Every creak of the floorboard, every cough, Every shift in the guest room door reminded me of a time I had buried deep. I kept staring out at my little garden. I planted it after my divorce, each flower bed, a small act of reclaiming my life. And now, just steps away, was the man who once stomped through every boundary I'd ever tried to set. The kettle clicked behind me. My tea was ready. I turned, reached for my cup, and jumped when I saw him standing in the kitchen doorway. "Morning," he said, like we were old friends. "Smells like mint." I didn't answer. I poured my tea slowly, deliberately. He stepped further in, arms crossed casually. "Do you still make that lemon pound cake?" he asked. I looked at him just once and said, "Not for you." He blinked, clearly caught off guard. For a second, his face shifted into something familiar: tight jaw, narrow eyes, the warning signs I used to read, like scripture. Then it was gone. "No need to be rude," he muttered, stepping back. "I'm just trying to be friendly." I stayed silent. I sipped my tea. I didn't raise my voice or explain myself. I'd spent too many years over-explaining my pain. That was his game: make me feel unreasonable, then paint himself as the victim. But not anymore. This wasn't his house. It wasn't his kitchen. And I wasn't the girl who once begged him to treat her like a person. A few minutes later, Jasmine came into the room, already dressed for work. She looked tired, maybe even nervous. "Morning, Mom," she said. "Gerald okay last night?" I didn't look at her. "He slept fine," I said flatly. She poured coffee and lowered her voice. "Can we try, please? He's really making an effort. He's in recovery. He's been through therapy." I turned to her slowly, my voice calm but sharp. "And I've been through him." She winced. "You always make things so black and white." "No," I said, setting my mug down. "You just don't like when I stop shrinking." She didn't respond. She grabbed her purse, mumbled, "I'll be home late," and left. And just like that, I was alone with the man who once shattered me. I went about my day as if he wasn't there. I swept. I pruned the garden. I watched my daytime news. Every hour or so, he'd try to make conversation. I didn't bite. He asked if I still played cards, if I still knit in the evenings, if I ever remarried. I gave him one-word answers or none at all. He didn't deserve my energy. I'd already lost too much to him. Around noon, I made a simple lunch for myself: boiled egg, toast, fruit. I sat at the table, quiet, peaceful. He wandered in and looked down at my plate. "You didn't make any for me?" I looked up. "No, I didn't," he scoffed. "You always used to cook for me." I set my fork down and met his gaze, steady and clear. "That woman is gone," he smirked. "You always were stubborn." I leaned back. "And you always underestimated me." He didn't respond. He walked out. And for the first time since he arrived, I felt stronger than him. Because when you've lived through fire, you learn to stop fearing smoke. And he could puff and threaten all he wanted. I wasn't moving this time. That night, Jasmine came home with takeout and tried to pretend everything was normal. "I brought Thai," she said, setting bags on the counter. Gerald appeared behind her like a stain you thought you cleaned. "Hope you're hungry, Diane," he said, using my name like it still belonged to him. I stayed seated. I didn't move. "Actually," I said, "I'll be eating in my room tonight, alone." Jasmine's face tightened. "Mom, please. You're making this harder than it needs to be." I stood up, slow and calm. "No, Jasmine. You already made it hard the day you brought him here without asking me." Her face flushed. Gerald raised his hands like he was the peacemaker. "It's okay. I'll win her over eventually." I turned and looked him dead in the eye. "You won't." I took my plate and left. That night, I ate in silence. And for the first time since they arrived, I slept a full 8 hours. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I had remembered exactly who I was and what I'd already survived. I could feel it in the air. Something was shifting between me and Jasmine. She used to come home, kiss my cheek, ask about my day. Now, she barely looked at me. She spoke in half sentences, cleaned up in a hurry, and spent her evenings tucked away in the guest room with him. Gerald had always been a master manipulator. He didn't raise his voice to scare you. He'd just plant little thoughts, dig quiet holes into your confidence until you questioned your own memory. And now, he was doing it again, only this time, It wasn't me he was targeting. It was my daughter. I overheard them one evening while folding laundry. My door was cracked open, and their voices drifted down the hall. You know, Jasmine, your mom's always been difficult. She's just protective. Protective or controlling. She's been through a lot. We both have. I'm trying here. She's not even willing to talk. It was his voice, smooth, wounded, practiced. I knew that tone. It used to make me doubt myself. But this time, I wasn't falling for it. What scared me was that Jasmine might. I stood frozen by the doorway, fists tightening around a towel, as I listened to him slowly rewrite our history. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about keeping my house safe. It was about protecting the truth before he poisoned it for good. The next morning, Jasmine came into the kitchen earlier than usual. She looked tired, like something was weighing her down. I was rinsing dishes, trying to stay calm, when she asked, "Mom, can we talk?" I turned off the faucet. Of course. She leaned against the counter and stared at the floor. Gerald told me some things last night, about how the marriage ended. My chest tightened. What things? She hesitated. He said you left without warning, that he was working on himself back then and you didn't give him a chance. I dried my hands and faced her. Did he mention the lamp? The night he threw it so hard it shattered next to your crib? Jasmine's eyes widened. I don't remember that. You were 4, I said quietly, and I made sure you never saw the worst. But don't let that make you think it didn't happen. She shifted, arms crossed, defensive now. He said he never laid a hand on you. My voice dropped to a calm, cutting whisper. That man left me with a bruised rib, a broken wrist, and the kind of silence that took years to unlearn, and I still never spoke badly about him to you. I paused. Until now. I could see her blinking fast, torn between what she wanted to believe and what was true. Why didn't you ever tell me? She asked. I swallowed hard. Because I didn't want to plant bitterness in your heart. I thought protecting you meant protecting you from the past. She looked at me, eyes swimming. I'm sorry. And for a moment, I thought the wall between us was coming down. But then she added, I still think he's trying to be better, and that's when I knew he had his hooks in deep. That night, I sat on my porch, hands wrapped around a mug of tea I never drank. I watched the street, the trees, the empty sidewalk, and I thought about how many women my age carry stories like mine, stories we were told to bury, minimize, survive quietly. But I wasn't quiet anymore. I couldn't afford to be, not with Jasmine at risk of being fooled by the same charm that once trapped me. I wasn't just a mother now. I was a living, breathing warning sign. And I wasn't about to let my daughter walk into a burning house just because someone redecorated it. The next day, I took action. Quietly, carefully. I found the old box I'd hidden at the top of my closet. Inside were hospital records, photos, a journal I'd kept during the worst years. Evidence. Truth. I placed the folder in the center of the dining table and left it there. When Jasmine came home, I didn't say a word. I just pointed to it. Before you let him rewrite my life, I said, read the one I actually lived. Then I walked away. I sat in the garden while she read. I didn't peek. I didn't pressure her. I just waited. An hour later, she came outside, face pale, hands trembling, holding the folder to her chest. She sat next to me in silence. And finally, she whispered, I had no idea. I nodded. That was the point. I never wanted you to know. But now you do. Her next words were soft and breaking. I'm so sorry, Mom. I looked at her. Don't be sorry. Be smart. And we both knew what had to happen next. The next morning was too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums beneath your skin and tells you something is about to snap. I was in the kitchen, slicing apples for breakfast, when Jasmine came down the hall with that old folder still in her hand. She looked different, no makeup, hair pulled back, eyes heavy but clear. She didn't greet me, didn't ask about tea. She went straight to the guest room. I heard her knock once. Then, we need to talk, now. My hands stilled on the cutting board. Part of me wanted to step in, to protect her from whatever storm would come next. But another part of me knew she had to do this herself. I turned off the stove and stood by the doorway, close enough to hear, but far enough to give her space. The door creaked open and Gerald's voice slithered out. "Morning, sweetheart. What's wrong?" Jasmine didn't wait. "You lied to me." Silence. Then a quiet chuckle. "About what?" "About what you did to my mother. About why she left." I could hear her voice tremble, but she didn't break. "You said she abandoned us, that she was unstable. But I read her journal, the police report, the hospital bills. You almost killed her." The silence that followed was thick and ugly. I imagined him sitting up in that bed, caught between arrogance and panic. He was never good at owning his mistakes, only deflecting them. "Jasmine," he started, "that was decades ago. I was in a dark place. I've changed." "You lied," she repeated. "I didn't know the truth because you covered it. You let me think she was the problem. You let me invite you into her house." Now her voice was cracking. "How dare you stand in front of me, in this home, and act like you're some victim just trying to heal?" I moved closer to the hallway. I couldn't see them, but I didn't need to. I knew that voice. I knew that fire. It wasn't just anger, it was awakening. She wasn't the girl who brought him to my door anymore. She was the woman who finally saw the man behind the smile. And then came the moment I didn't expect to hear, but had prayed for ever since that front door opened. "Pack your things," Jasmine said. "You're leaving today." Gerald tried one last time. "You don't mean that." Her answer? "No, but I do. Because she meant everything, and you tried to erase her." An hour later, his suitcase rolled down the hallway. I stood in the kitchen as he passed. He didn't look at me. Good. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of my reaction. Jasmine followed behind, holding the front door open like a final goodbye. He muttered something low, something bitter. I didn't catch the words, but I didn't need to. It was the sound of a man who'd finally lost control. He walked out the door and into the street like he'd just lost a game he thought he'd already won. Jasmine closed the door and locked it twice. The click echoed through the house like a cleansing bell. She turned to me slowly, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. Then she walked across the room and wrapped her arms around me, not gently, not cautiously, but fully, like a daughter who finally understood the weight her mother had carried all these years. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered into my shoulder. I didn't see it. I didn't want to. I held her tighter than I had in years. "You weren't supposed to see it," I said. "I spent my life trying to make sure you didn't have to." She pulled back and wiped her eyes. "But I do now, and I'm not letting him back in. Ever." That night, the house felt different again, but this time, not from fear. It felt clean, quiet in the right ways. The air smelled like jasmine and ginger tea instead of tension. We sat on the couch, side by side, legs curled up like we used to when she was a teenager. We didn't talk about Gerald anymore. We talked about her work, her new promotion, the things she never told me because she didn't want to worry me. And for the first time, I saw her for who she really was. Not just my daughter, but a woman capable of breaking her own cycles, of standing up for truth even when it hurt. Before we went to bed, she looked at me and asked, "Why didn't you ever tell me the full story?" I smiled sadly. "Because I wanted you to love yourself without hating where you came from." She nodded, slowly understanding. "Well," she said, "I don't hate it. I'm just not carrying what doesn't belong to me anymore." I turned out the light. That's all I ever wanted. And in that darkness, we slept not just with our eyes closed, but with our hearts finally safe. The morning after Gerald left, the house felt hollow, but not in a bad way. It was the kind of hollow that comes after a storm passes. There's silence, yes, but also sunlight starting to peek through the clouds. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea, staring at the same window I'd looked through for years. I didn't feel relief exactly. I felt tired. Not physically, soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that builds after holding your breath for too many years, waiting for someone to truly believe your pain. Jasmine joined me, wearing my old bathrobe and carrying that worried expression children wear when they realize their parent is more human than they ever knew. She sat across from me and just watched for a few moments. "I want to fix this," she said. "I want to make it up to you." I smiled faintly. "You can't fix it, baby. This isn't a leaky faucet. She looked down. Then what can I do? I took a slow sip and answered honestly. You can understand that surviving isn't the same as healing. You can stop thinking a single "I'm sorry" makes 30 years disappear. Her eyes filled, but she didn't turn away this time. She nodded. Okay, then tell me all of it. I didn't tell her everything. Not right away. You don't unwrap wounds like gifts. You reveal them in layers, as you learn to trust again even with your own child. So I started with the quiet parts. The way I used to count the minutes before he got home, planning my words like a soldier mapping a field. The way I learned to breathe shallow in bed so he wouldn't accuse me of faking sleep. The time he broke my favorite mug, then forced me to apologize for making him angry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just let it spill gently but clearly. Jasmine sat still the whole time, her hands folded in her lap. At one point, she whispered, I remember the night you grabbed me and we left. I was little, but I remember your face. I thought we were going on an adventure. I smiled weakly. We were, an adventure away from fear. She reached across the table and took my hand. You were so strong, Mama. I nodded. Yes, but strength doesn't mean I wasn't breaking inside. That part seemed to land differently. She squeezed my hand and said something that settled deep in my chest. I want to be strong like you, but I also want to know what it cost you so I never ask another woman to pay the same price. Later that day, Jasmine cleaned out the guest room. I didn't ask her to, and I didn't help. That was her work to do. I heard her vacuuming, bagging up linens, tossing out things he left behind, like shedding the last flakes of a nightmare. When she came back into the kitchen, she looked different, firmer, more grounded. She sat down again and said, You gave me everything, even when you had nothing. I want to earn that kind of courage. I looked at her, this daughter who once brought my abuser back into my home and now sat across from me, humbled and awake. Then promise me, I said softly, if you ever have a daughter, don't raise her to be polite at her own expense. Jasmine teared up. I won't. Don't teach her to serve men who break her, I added. I won't, she whispered. And don't ever let her believe silence is strength. She reached for my hand again. I promise, Mama. That night, we cooked dinner together for the first time in months. Nothing fancy roasted chicken, sweet potatoes, green beans with a little garlic and oil. Jasmine set the table, humming like she used to when she was 13. I lit the candles not for romance, but for ritual, a quiet way to honor how far we had come. We ate slowly, talking about simple things. No drama, no heavy words, just the peace of rebuilding. Before bed, Jasmine knocked on my door. She held something behind her back. I got this today, she said, handing me a tiny wooden box. Inside was a bracelet made of small brass beads. The tag read, To the women who walk through fire and never let it define them. I held it in my hands and smiled. Thank you, I said. She hugged me. I love you. And this time, I believed her. Because now, we weren't hiding anymore. 3 days after Gerald left, Jasmine told me she was quitting her job. We were in the backyard, trimming the lavender bushes, when she dropped the news like a stone in a still pond. I'm done, she said, snapping a brittle stem. I've been thinking about it for weeks. I don't want to spend another year pretending to love a life that drains me. I looked up, surprised but not shocked. I had seen that quiet weight on her face for months ever since she moved back in. What will you do instead? I asked gently. She exhaled slowly. I want to start my own practice, therapy for women, survivors, women like you. My chest tightened in the best way. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't even dared to hope. That's a big leap, I said. She smiled. So was walking away from him. But I did it. Later that night, she posted about her decision online. Nothing detailed, just that she was stepping away from corporate life to pursue something meaningful. The response was immediate. Supportive messages poured in. But so did criticism, especially from family. Aunt Lillian, always the proud one, commented, You're throwing away stability after everything your mother gave up to raise you? I stared at the comment, jaw tight. After everything I gave up? She thinks she knows what I gave up? Jasmine didn't respond, but I did. I typed slowly, deliberately. I didn't raise her to play it safe. I raised her to choose herself. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rude. But it was final. Aunt Lillian replied minutes later. You always were dramatic, Diane. Always painting yourself as the hero. I almost laughed. This was the same woman who used to ask, why don't you just fix your marriage? While I sat in church with a bruised rib hidden under my blouse. The same one who said, you two were such a beautiful couple, as if beauty had ever softened a blow. I'd stayed silent for decades, but silence never saved me. It only delayed my healing. I replied again, being silent nearly cost me my life. I won't be quiet now that my daughter is finally listening. Jasmine read the thread over my shoulder. You didn't have to defend me, she said softly. I looked at her. I wasn't defending you. I was defending me for the first time out loud. And it felt good. Strange, but good. Like finally exhaling after years of holding breath you forgot was trapped in your chest. The next day, we got a visit. Aunt Liliani's, in person. She showed up in her high heels and tight-lipped judgment like she was coming to settle something. Jasmine was out running errands, so it was just me. I opened the door slowly, already bracing myself. Well, she said, stepping inside without asking, I guess I should congratulate you. You've raised a quitter. I didn't flinch. I simply walked back into the kitchen, letting her talk. Do you know how many women would kill for what Jasmine had? Good job, benefits, a path. And she threw it away to do what? Hug broken women for a living? I turned, calm but firm. To help broken women, women like me. That stopped her. Don't pretend you understand, she snapped. You left a man because you were emotional, and now she's following in your footsteps. That was it. I set my teacup down slowly and looked her in the eyes. I left a man because he almost killed me. I raised a daughter in fear, in silence, in sacrifice. And yes, I wanted her to do better, but what I've learned is, better doesn't mean richer. It doesn't mean safer. It means free. Lillian opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. If that makes me dramatic, so be it. I've earned the right to live out loud. She didn't stay long after that. She mumbled something about needing to pray on it and left in a rush. I didn't watch her go. I didn't even close the door behind her right away. I stood in that quiet hallway, sunlight warming my shoulder, and felt the deepest kind of peace. Not because I'd won a fight, but because I'd refused to fight for someone else's approval. I wasn't the girl who needed defending anymore. When Jasmine got home and I told her what happened, she hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, Mama, she said, for saying the things I didn't know you'd been holding all these years. I smiled. It was time. She nodded. I think we're both just now learning how to be loud without guilt. I nodded too. And loud without anger. She laughed, still working on that part. We both were. But for the first time, we weren't working in silence. Jasmine's new chapter started quietly. No ribbon cutting, no social media fanfare, just a folded laptop, a notebook full of ideas, and a living room turned into a part-time office. She called it the second step, a place for women healing from trauma who didn't know where to go after surviving. I helped her hang the shelves. She did the rest. Watching her build something so rooted in compassion made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Hope that the pain I lived through might help someone else rise. We were sitting at the table that Wednesday afternoon, me sorting through seed packets for spring. Her drafting client intake forms when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then froze. Her face went tight, jaw clenched. I recognized that expression immediately. The way she used to look at me when she was a little girl and didn't want to tell me she'd broken something. Who is it? I asked. She swallowed. It's him, Gerald. My fingers paused mid-motion. What does he want? She hesitated, then handed me the phone. The message was short. Tell your mother I'm sorry. I was wrong. I've been thinking about her every day. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't long. But it made my skin crawl all the same. After all this time, he still wanted to write his way back in with one sentence. I stared at the screen, not reading, just remembering. Because a message like that doesn't come alone. It comes with the echo of slammed doors, the taste of apologies that used to follow fists, The way he'd say "I'm sorry" while handing me flowers from a gas station, as if petals could erase pain. Jasmine waited, watching me. I placed the phone down and reached for my tea. "He's not sorry," I said softly. "He's just lonely." She nodded. "Do you want me to block him?" I looked up. "You can, but you don't have to protect me from him anymore. I'm not afraid of ghosts." She raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" I smiled, the kind that comes from deep, lived through pain. "I don't need a wall anymore. I built something stronger than that. I built a life without him." I slid the phone back toward her. "If he ever messages again, don't respond." Let silence be the answer I never had the courage to give back then. She nodded. And for the first time, I felt like the end of the story wasn't him leaving. It was me choosing not to let him back in. That night, I sat alone on the porch under a soft breeze. Jasmine had gone to bed early, and the stars were bright, clear like the sky itself had been washed clean. I thought about all the women I knew who had never gotten apologies, who never got the chance to say, "I didn't deserve that." Some of them buried their pain under layers of homemaking, volunteering, Sunday smiles. Others carried it in their backs and bones until they broke without ever explaining why. And now, here I was, 65 years old, holding an apology that came too late to matter. And you know what? I didn't want it. Because apologies don't undo decades. They don't take away the sound of your daughter crying in a shelter, asking when daddy's going to come home. They don't fix the night you sat in an ER with a lie on your lips and a bruise blooming under your sleeve. They don't erase the way you startle when someone closes a cabinet too hard. That kind of healing isn't found in a sentence. It's found in a decision. And mine was simple. I forgive him, but only so I can stay free. The next morning, I watched Jasmine lead her first session over Zoom. Her voice was calm, steady, full of purpose. I sat on the stairs, just out of view, listening to my daughter hold space for another woman's pain. It hit me that I wasn't just watching her career begin. I was watching our legacy change shape. From survival to service. From silence to storytelling. From hiding to healing. After she ended the call, she turned and smiled at me. "Did you hear any of that?" she asked. "Just enough," I said. "You were good." She grinned. "I had a good teacher." I shook my head. "No, baby, I didn't teach you to heal. I just taught you to run." She stepped closer. And I ran right into my purpose. We hugged then. No tears this time. Just warmth. Just peace. Just two women who had been through fire and were now lighting candles instead of carrying torches. It had been a month since Gerald's final message and Jasmine's first official client. Things had calmed down around the house. Jasmine's days were busy with virtual sessions, her calendar now sprinkled with names and time slots. But mine? Mine had returned to the quiet rhythm I thought I wanted. Tea in the mornings, radio news humming in the background. Lavender trimming, book reading, and slow dinners in silence when Jasmine worked late. But if I'm being honest, a strange emptiness had crept in. Not sadness, just a soft ache in the corner of the day, like something inside me was whispering, "You've survived. Now what?" It was a Thursday when that question was answered. I was watering the potted plants out front when I heard footsteps on the walkway. I turned, expecting a delivery truck or a curious neighbor. Instead, I saw a man I hadn't seen in over 40 years, Samuel Brown. I nearly dropped the watering can. "Diane?" he asked, tilting his head the way he used to in high school, when he didn't understand algebra but still managed to make me laugh about it. He looked older, of course we both did. His hair was silver now, but his smile hadn't changed. "Samuel?" I blinked. "What are you doing here?" He held up a folder. "I just moved into the house down the block. Bought it from the Stinsons. I came by to introduce myself, and then I saw your name on the mailbox." I laughed, half disbelief, half nerves. "You live here? Now?" He nodded. "Just me. Wife passed 5 years ago. Kids are grown and scattered." He looked down, then up. "I was hoping this place would be a quiet new start." I smiled. "Well, then you've come to the right porch." We stood there awkwardly for a moment. Old history stretching between us like a bridge we forgot how to cross. Samuel was my high school sweetheart, my first kiss, my first heartbreak. The first person I thought I'd marry before life took us different directions. We broke up before college. I never told him why. He never asked. And I guess that was the end of it. Until now. I'm glad you're still around, he said softly. You always had the strongest spirit in the room. I tilted my head. That's what people say when they don't know what you've survived. He nodded slowly. Then maybe I'd like to know. We sat on the porch for over an hour. At first, we spoke about small things, neighbors, gardening, the way the town had changed. Then slowly, we got to the real stuff. I told him I had a daughter. He told me he had 2 sons. I told him I'd been married once. He didn't ask the details. And for that, I was grateful. I used to wonder about you, he said quietly, especially when the boys were grown. I'd think about who you became, if you were happy. I looked at the sky, streaked with orange now. I don't know if happy is the right word, I said, but I'm here, whole. After everything, I'm still standing. He nodded. That's more than most people can say. He stood up, brushed off his pants. Well, I won't take up more of your evening, but I'd love to have coffee sometime. No pressure, just 2 old folks catching up. I smiled and walked him to the edge of the steps. I'd like that, Samuel. And I meant it, because somewhere in my chest, something had shifted. Maybe joy wasn't behind me after all. That night, Jasmine noticed the spring in my step. Who was that earlier? She asked with a playful grin. Just an old friend, I replied, sipping my tea slowly. She raised an eyebrow. A friend who used to kiss you under the football bleachers? I laughed. You know too much. We sat in the living room, a candle flickering on the table between us. She leaned against my shoulder like she used to when she was little. You know, Mama, I didn't think you had space left for new beginnings. I looked down at her and smiled. Neither did I. And that's when I realized my story wasn't winding down. It was unfolding in a new chapter. A chapter that didn't have to be about pain, or survival, or sacrifice. It could be about softness, laughter, maybe even love on my own terms this time. 2 weeks passed after Samuel's visit, and every morning since, he'd wave at me from his porch like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes he brought over coffee. Sometimes he brought pie. Sometimes we just sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between 2 people who've known both heartbreak and healing. Jasmine watched it unfold like a movie. So, what are we calling this? She asked one evening. Arms folded with a smirk. I gave her a look. We're calling it 2 old friends catching up. She raised her eyebrows. You blushed when he brought lemon pie, Mama. I blushed because it was dry, I said, sipping my tea. But we both knew better. There was something in Samuel's presence that didn't just soothe mate, reminded me that life doesn't stop blooming just because you've turned the last page of your so-called prime. Sometimes, the best chapters come later, the ones you write with full clarity, with scars you no longer hide. That Friday, Jasmine asked me to speak at her first in-person event, a small circle of women healing from domestic trauma. You don't have to, she said gently. But I think they'd listen to you like I finally did. I said yes. It was held in a local rec center. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs, soft lights, a table with tea and tissues. The women sat in a circle, all ages, all stories. Some still married, some divorced, some had never told anyone until that night. I sat beside Jasmine, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding not from fear but from the weight of truth I'd carried for too long. She introduced me simply. This is my mother, the reason I found the strength to start this journey. She's never told her story in a room like this before. And then she sat down. I looked around the circle. Some women wouldn't meet my eyes. Others watched me like they were holding their breath. I took mine first. My name is Diane, I said. I'm 65 years old, and for most of my adult life, I didn't think my story mattered. I thought surviving was enough. But it's not. Survival without voice is just another kind of silence. I told them about Gerald, about the bruises, the fear. The night I ran with Jasmine clutched to my chest. I told them about the years I spent rebuilding, not just my life, but my sense of worth. And then I told them how it all came full circle the day my daughter brought him back. I didn't cry while telling it. I didn't shake. I told it like I was hanging laundry carefully, piece by piece, with no shame. Because shame didn't belong to me anymore. When I finished, the room was still. One woman, maybe in her 30s, whispered, "I never thought I'd leave, but hearing you, maybe I can." Another, much older than me, grabbed my hand and said, "Thank you for proving it's never too late." And in that moment, I knew my pain hadn't been wasted. It had turned into permission. For them, for Jasmine, for me. Later that evening, Jasmine hugged me tight. "I've never been prouder of you," she whispered. I smiled into her shoulder. "You gave me the stage. I just finally stood on it." The next morning, Samuel came by with 2 coffees and a folded newspaper. "Heard you were a big hit last night," he said with a grin. I raised an eyebrow. Word travels fast. He handed me the paper. I might have asked around. We sat on the porch, side by side, watching the breeze roll through the trees. After a few quiet minutes, he turned to me. "Diane," he said, "I know you've lived a life that demanded strength, but if you ever want a season of softness, I'd like to be part of that." I looked at him, really looked, and saw not a rescue but a man offering peace. And for once, I wasn't afraid to reach for it. "I think," I said, smiling, "that I've earned a little softness." He smiled back. "Then let's begin." And just like that, at 65, after all the loss and betrayal and quiet victories, I finally stepped into a future that didn't ask me to shrink, hide, or explain. Just to be. So you guys can see, she spent her life surviving in silence, until the day her daughter brought the past back into her home. But instead of breaking down, she stood up. Not just for herself, but for every woman who was told to be quiet, to forgive, to endure. And in that final moment, she didn't ask for revenge. She chose peace. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means finally being free. What part of this story touched you the most? Drop it in the comments. We read everyone. And remember, here on Stories After 65, it's never too late to tell your truth, reclaim your voice, and start a chapter that's just for you.